Carl Lentz dropped part 2 of his podcast on a B-side app and actually confirmed a few things that I said in the initial comment that I put up. Now, this is part 2 of his conversation with B-side. I think they did a fantastic job in just the way it's shot and the aesthetic of everything. Props to everybody over there. Props to my guy Hector and Malachi, Tim Ross, all those folks. They did a fantastic job with this. We looked at part 1 of the conversation, and I generally liked it. There was a few things I disagreed. You can go back and watch part 1. Part 2, he goes on to confirm some of my deeper concerns with how someone who has his background, has his issues, which he opens up in this, about being essayed as a kid, about all the issues he's gone through, how someone like him ends up in these relationships, and the question of if he will ever return to ministry is addressed. And again, kind of says something that many of us have said and echoed. Check this out.
Oh, you still have to live like that.
It's hard.
It's hard.
Been there.
Yeah.
Been there. With relationships, Brian and Bobby and our relationship to Hillsong. For those of you who don't know, that the church we were part of was a part of a bigger picture. And when I let people down, it began like a cascade of things that were discovered and happening. And what my relationship like? What do I think about Brian?
Yeah. What's your how do you feel about that now? Because I know people ask that.
They do.
Well, they want you to be like a certain way.
I mean,
So he's talking about Brian Houston. Brian Houston is the founding pastor of Hillsong. After the situation happened with Carl and it all went viral and he was caught cheating, Brian, in a couple staff meetings, kind of threw him under the bus and like got him out of there really, really, really quick. He goes on to share that he signed an NDA and why this all went down. And then later it came out and Brian went to court that it was alleged that he knew about his father's essay against a young boy, and the church may have been complicit in covering it up. I'm pretty sure he beat that case, but there's other things that Lentz alludes to in this.
I will always love Brian and Bobby, no question. Love is a choice. I choose that. I choose to love them. My experience with Brian up until my epic failure was he was a hero to me. He really pulled me out of a crowd and just said, I believe in you, and gave me opportunity, gave me trust. I never once felt like I went through any battles that he didn't have my back.
Right.
We got.
And Lentz is saying all of this is a good thing. He pulled me out of a crowd. He gave me opportunity, and he gave me trust. To me, I'm just going to be honest. I said this in a previous video. This is a cultural issue within certain charismatic Pentecostal movements where because someone has charisma, is a good communicator, they can be pulled out of a crowd, given trust, and given opportunity. Scripturally, the person that is leading a church, the person that is an elder, overseer, a bishop, that really should have a community of people leading with him. I like the idea of people leading together and there being checks and balances. That person has very specific requirements of being above reproach and being a one-man, married to one wife, of being sound in doctrine. I'm talking 1 Timothy chapter 6, Titus 2. So there's very specific requirements of who's someone that's leading and an elder of a church and how they are to conduct themselves. Here we have Brian plucking people out and giving them opportunity and trust. Now, he's not saying this is a bad thing, but I'm not sure why he's not connecting that culture and that let me pluck someone out, give them opportunity, give them trust, give them platform is highly dangerous. Highly dangerous when you haven't done the due diligence of figuring out what are their triggers, what are their traumas, what are the things what is their baggage? Are they getting potential, are they getting the treatment they need? And so I think that's the part where, again, this is more of a church culture thing to me.
Got along really well most of the time, and then as I got older, towards the end of my time at Hillsong NYC, we had difference of opinions a lot, which he was always relatively cool with. He always left room for that. We definitely butted heads, and we definitely had some issues, and had it not gone down like it did, I probably would have still left, but it wouldn't have been bad.
Yeah.
Now that's a revelation. He's saying he would have left Hillsong At some point, Hillsong New York City, he would have lived regardless. It just wouldn't have been as messy. That's a revelation to me, right? Because, I mean, Hillsong was massive in New York. There's a lot of people that went through that church, right? So that's interesting.
And so my overriding sentiment about Brian is that I'm grateful. I'm really grateful for him because I've been taught too good to stop it where the tragedy is. So how I feel about Brian now, very different. I was crushed by what happened. But before that, if you had to ask me what that man means to me, I'm grateful for him. You know, he gave me a lot of trust and let me do something that will always be a really, really special part of my life, to be able to plant that.
So again, my question is, he gave me a lot of trust. Carl was pastoring at a church in Virginia, charismatic. I believe he was leading their youth or young adults ministry under Pastor Steve Kelly, Wave Church, Virginia. Carl does the thing that I think he thought was the best thing. Back then, Hillsong's Bible College in Australia was the standard. There was the gold standard where charismatic leaders went if they wanted to do worship or they wanted to grow and get equipped. So he does the thing that you are supposed to do in many of the circles that I grew up in and affiliated with. And a lot of people went to these colleges. This was explored and Hillsong exposed. So he does the thing that he thinks he is supposed to do to get equipped, only to not really get equipped and just get platformed. He could have stayed in Virginia and just got platformed. Maybe he wouldn't have been a household name in evangelical circles, right? And so I think that's the gap in this is, again, he's trying to do what he thinks is right, but there's this culture that platforms and promotes and puts people up based on their physical giftings and less on their spiritual development and character.
Church in the middle of the greatest city on earth, and to see it explode was far beyond what we ever thought could happen. And so I'm grateful for Brian.
I think he was extremely proud of us for that. For some reason, at the end, it kind of it was twisted, but for the most part, like you know.
I think the hardest part of that was that the narrative was shifted so quickly from him being a second dad to me, proud of me, tight as a drum, to like, this guy is a renegade, vagabond, always been doing it. Like, all this stuff started coming out. And I was so like, man, that's not the way this was.
Yeah.
Because his empire was at stake. The Hillsong empire is $100 million a year empire was at stake. That's why he switched up.
And then to find out that I wasn't the only one that had some things that weren't talked about, that's what shocked us the whole time anyway, is that we saw this stuff going down and we would see interviews in media, and I kept thinking, I know so much. They must not think I'm going to say anything because this is outrageous. Like, I could do one interview and put all this to bed and out a lot of people about a lot of things.
And I think that might have been the
and he could have, and is glad that he didn't. But that to me confirms everything I've been saying, and a lot of people have been saying, was this is a cultural issue. And I think charismatics, and specifically people that swim in the same streams as Hillsong, need to take some sober reflection and inventory of how are we positioning people as leaders and pastors, and who are we ordaining, and why are we ordaining them? So the fact that he's saying, oh, I wasn't the only one, and he's right. He's not the only one. There's all kinds of issues that came out about Hillsong, about multiple pastors doing this sort of thing. So if we see bad fruit across an entire denominational spectrum, and then you see the founder of said denomination not just getting a public trial, and let's just steel man and say Brian Houston is innocent of all those things, his prescription drug issue, his alcohol issue, his issue of being in a woman's bedroom after some event and staying there. I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. So again, culture will eat vision for lunch. When you don't have healthy culture, you can have the greatest vision and the greatest intent, but when you don't have a healthy culture and healthy people, this is how things play out.
motivation probably for why they kept doing things, because your reaction naturally would be to do that.
Yeah, I think they were preparing.
And I think they were
preparing
for that. So they did all this, and it's like, oh, you didn't like.
I wonder if the conversation was, we got to hit him before he hits us, because he's definitely going to say something.
Yeah.
And I do know about a lot of stuff,
right?
But I haven't found it constructive on this side of the situation to talk about other people's business. Mm-hmm. That stuff comes out on its own. We have never, and I don't know if we will. I mean, it's a point now where it's like, cool, yeah, I do have a microphone again.
Right.
And I don't expect people to talk as recklessly now that they know that I'm not just going to fade off into, oblivion.
Well, how does on?
Well, I was going to say
Is that like a little subtle threat there? I don't got a microphone again, and then I'm going to talk as recklessly about me?
Everybody sounds right until they're cross-examined. And one of the hardest parts of this was watching things be said with no defense at all. It was like whatever you wanted to say about us, about the church, nobody was saying anything. And I found out a lot during that time. And I feel like there's an old adage, you find out what you're worth to somebody when you can offer them nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And if
I don't want to, I'm highlighting this part because honestly, this is the part that I found interesting. And I think this is the part that confirms what I said in the previous reaction of this. But to be fair to them, guys, that's not what this entire conversation is about. I'm giving you guys a little excerpt about the part that I'm like, oh, he's echoing what I just said in episode 2. Props to him. I hope he would see the systemic issues wrong. But to be fair to Carl and Laura, that is not what this entire podcast is about. He talks about him going to like an 8-week recovery where he didn't have his phone, didn't have access to the internet. She talks about her issues and how she dealt with it. They talk about how they got jobs, how she was driving for Uber Eats. This is way more than just this part. I'm just highlighting this part because I found this interesting, and I think it confirms what we just talked about in the previous video and the broader issue around celebrity pastor culture, which I would hope that Lentz would intentionally forewarn against, right? And I do believe that he's done the work and that he deserves grace. So I just want to be fair. We're going to get into to a little bit more of that here in a second.
Stop surprised me because I was like, of course, that's what we do. But my thing was the culture of cover-up. That's what the culture that we had. And if anybody says anything different, they don't know the situation. What I mean by cover-up is there was a time in my life where I felt like cover-up could be switched out for the word protection.
Protect.
And I now look at it when I was involved in things that were covering things up for other people. My whole life as a pastor in different, there were some times where it was protection, where people don't need to know, but there was other times where it should have been brought to light. And the way we operated at Hillsong Church was, if it benefits us to be honest, we're going to be real honest. If it doesn't, we're going to be really private. And so the motivation.
Darkness.
Again, I said it. It's a cultural issue, and it goes beyond just Hillsong.
People have said, well, if you're not guilty of things, why didn't you say something? And I said, well, number one, it wouldn't have mattered. But two, we also signed an NDA, which is a practice of most corporations and some churches. I'm not saying it's right, not saying it's wrong, but the way it works, and we didn't know any of this because I've never gotten fired before. We were told we had to sign this NDA in order to get half of a severance payment for like a year's salary, and you have no money. We were scrambling, didn't know what was going on, and it was not a lot of money, but if I didn't sign it, I couldn't have got anything.
That's a problem. NDAs in churches are a problem. Red flag. Red flag. Some of you guys sign NDAs to volunteer at a church. Get out of that church. Get out of that church. That's a problem. So they force him into signing an NDA to get half of a salary of severance. That's a cultural problem. All right. And then he addresses if he's ever going to be a pastor again, which I thought was very refreshing because he agrees. He agrees with what many of us have been saying, and props to him.
And I'll say this. I think how I would sum it up is people talk about the word restoration. Here's what I wanted to be restored to: your husband and their dad.
Yeah.
That's right. That's what restoration is ultimately about.
So I'm good.
Right.
People always put the words to ministry on the back of restoration to ministry. And I believe it does the whole word a disservice. We've never been about that. We've never had a single conversation about that. It's simply been about let's try to restore our lives.
This is specifically addressing if he will ever come back to ministry.
It's been said a few times, the comeback. When are you coming back? Or when are you come back, Carl? Like, I want to be there with you when you come back. Like, what do you feel about that? How do you feel about that?
I appreciate it. I totally understand it because it's a word used and it's a thing. What we think is there's no comeback because the person that I was is no longer here, just not here. That version of me died,
right?
And what has developed is a new person, a new life, a new lease on life, a new mentality, a new way to think. So I wouldn't say I'm coming back because there's nothing to come back to. The chapter closed. To go back to that would mean I'm going backwards, literally. I don't want to come back to that life. I don't want to go back to that church circle. I don't want to go back to that way of thinking. I don't want to go back to any of it. I feel like for us, it's a new chapter. If anything, it's a rebirth. I mean, we started our second marriage. There are other things that we've decided to look at like that. We're in the second half of life. And so, no, if people are like, are you coming back? No, I'm not coming back. Because, as a preaching church, we're doing a podcast to talk about things that were painful for us in the hopes that other people won't have to go through the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's a rebirth into that. That's it. Relax. There's no comeback. There's nothing to come back to.
Do
It's a
you
new
miss
start.
preaching?
Yeah, I miss parts of it. And yes, easy answer is yeah, I miss preaching because I like what we're able to do. I know also what I'm created to do. I know what I'm good at. I'm a good preacher. God gifted me to be able to communicate things in a way that a lot of people resonate with. So that's a part of it that I miss, but I'm really content in the season.
And do you like what
So
you're doing now?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. It feels really free to not be leading something so heavy.
Right.
And I'm still enjoying it. And there's a price to pay both ways. So I love what we do.
So yeah, no comeback, no preaching, no ministry, no church. I think that's awesome. I think that's ultimately good. I think he is going to find his sweet spot. I think a lot of these guys are communicators, motivational speakers, not pastors. And I think if we built a culture that allowed people who are communicators to just be communicators and not feel like they have to throw themselves into ministry, I think we'd have a way more functional, healthy culture. And I think that perhaps that's what's going to get modeled after this. Now, here's something interesting. I talked about the avatar. Young, charismatic, gifted, good-looking, late 20s, early 30s, builds a mega church, undealt with issues from their childhood, bad systems for accountability, poor leadership. That's the recipe for this sort of avatar. I was thinking about this. Carl is 45 years old now. The church that I attend, Rhythm Church in Oceanside, my pastor didn't plant the church till he was like 44, 45 years old. And there's a stark contrast. Let me tell you, there's a stark contrast about being underneath leadership that didn't start until they were in their 40s and being under leadership that started in their early 30s. Stark contrast of difference. And I think there's something to systems and hierarchies and structures that can protect people from themselves and also equip people that actually meet the requirements of a elder, overseer, and the systems around for accountability and so on and so forth. And so I'm glad that they're talking about this. I'm glad they got a podcast. They did work jobs. They did go and lead quiet lives. And I think this is a opportunity presented to them that will hopefully help other people avoid these mistakes, which I think is huge. Because there's a lot of people that are doing this sort of stuff, living these sort of lives quietly, privately, secretly, and it's going to do damage to a lot of people. And so I think they'll be used as a part of hopefully helping people avoid. I'm just looking at the chat, catching up on the chat. Wasn't he hired by a church as a consultant or something? He was hired by a church as a consultant on their recovery ministry because he had gone through this recovery journey over the course of, I want to say, 3 years. So he was at transformation for that. He was not at transformation in a ministry capacity or in a any type of capacity. I think he gets into the next episode of what he did for work. He did go get a normal job for years. She had a normal job for years. And so that is what I think happened there. And by the way, I think we also have to guard against, like, just because something is big and booming and God is using it, that doesn't mean that everything about it is operating within God's ways. There are a lot of things that are big and booming that God may not be in terms of the leadership, if that makes sense. You know? Getting scooped up at a young age, though, into the attention and the ears of millions, I can imagine how someone who can't talk to anyone falls. Yeah. Someone that doesn't have a therapist, that doesn't have good accountability, that doesn't have great friends that can ask him and check him. In this conversation, he actually goes on about being the type of friend that would fly to anyone at any time to be with his friends, and then said when that wasn't reciprocated, it hurt him. But then he goes on to say, oh, and maybe that wasn't healthy. Maybe me running to people was actually poor boundaries on my part, which I was like, man, that is great self-awareness on his part, because he was the guy that would be at Justin Bieber's side. He was the guy that would be at his friend's side. And then when all this hit the fan, there wasn't any everybody in his side, besides a handful of people, specifically his crew of people all kind of abandoned him. And in that, he said, and I love that he said this, he said that he is way more careful with his language. He doesn't use words like brothers and family. He's very selective with those types of words for actual brothers and family, because in these church circles, you can get really like, oh, that's my brother, right? Like you start using language that's not real. Where does his celebrity friends think of him now? He mentions that in the episode. He says some of them, he says one of them he's talked to, the rest he hasn't talked to. I don't know. I don't know what they think now. I know a lot of people were hurt. I know Andrew Schultz admitted to being hurt. I'm pretty he had a lot of influence over a lot of people. He was on Logan Paul way before he had on Cliff. He was on the Breakfast Club. He was on. He had influence over guys like Andrew Schultz, Charlemagne. He had a lot of influence over a lot of people in the industry. Obviously, Justin Bieber. Doing shots with Bieber, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it is what it is, and I'm glad that he's getting help. I always hear pastors who fall from grace say they never had anyone to talk to, and that never made sense to me. I work in healthcare, and healthcare is the easiest thing for me to get. I know everyone. Ministry is not that way, sis. Pastors got to really go out of their way to find people to talk to. It's just not that way. It's just not that way. It's different. Healthcare is different. Because you can be sick as a nurse or a doctor. You can't really afford to be sick as a pastor. Spiritually sick. Because now your livelihood's at stake. You get it? So it's a little different. So anyway, guys, I got to go. I love you guys. We'll be back next week. We got a bunch of bangers dropping over the weekend. Make sure you're tapped in for that. And we will see you next week. Hey, Father's Day sale happening right now. Don't miss it. BlessGod.shop. Go get something for your dad. Go get something for your pastor. Go get something for that father figure in your life. The prayer journal is the cheapest it's ever been, $24.99 for the black and the tan. You can get the Priest Provider Protector shirts. I'm wearing one of the shirts. You can get the Priest Provider Protector hat. This will be the time to bless that dad in your life. Get it immediately so that you can get it in time for Father's Day. All right? So this is happening now. BlessGod.shop. I'll see you guys over there, all right?